adaptation finance gap. We heard from Dr. Lahani this morning, a $44 billion gap in adaptation resources for infrastructure in Asia, $4.4 billion available. I'm presuming the disparities are similar for the Pacific. So to me, the issue then becomes is the funds versus funding. And again, all of these comments are, filtered in my mind through the scope of this project. I think there are two areas here. One is certainly the key role that the funds play, the continuing interest in funds, the importance of understanding how they operate, the increasing relevance of direct access, I think particularly as the Green Climate Fund will come on over the next couple of years. And we heard quite a bit about that. The whole accreditation, the project process, working through intermediaries like ADB and the bilaterals. So that, and the lessons learned from that. I mean, that was the topic that got a lot of attention today, and I think, and there's, that's very relevant for ADAPT. That whole area is in the mainstream of the project. The second piece, though, of the funds versus finance, that's the funds. The other side of the coin, though, is the financing. And this huge gap, and it's clearly not going to be filled just by the funds. So the need to, and again, this was touched on in the session, and then briefly in the sessions, was looking at new sources of financing, which again is something that we're going to have to grapple with. The idea of private sector involvement. What are the entry points for private sector involvement? The idea possibly of bonds. This is something I worked on quite a bit in India for funding water and sanitation. Bringing that into the adaptation realm, is something that's probably worth looking at. The role of the multilateral and bilateral, using their own internal resources to fund adaptation projects. The idea of domestic resources, that came up. Ms. Gosun mentioned that, and that came up and also in David Macaulay's talk. What is the scope really for tapping and leveraging domestic resources? I think all these things in the realm of funds versus financing, we're going to have to look at. It's not, I think, strictly a funds approach to what we're doing. So that is the first theme. Second theme is this whole idea of, and again, how we're going to respond to this. The idea that project preparation has to be in alignment with national development plans, economic development plans, et cetera. I think, you begin to think about that, and that's obviously critical. We have a project focus, so how are we going to ensure that, what are we going to do within our resources and scope to address that issue? And I think that's very important. What we can't be doing is just developing projects and assuming, maybe, presumably they have been positioned within an overall national policy. But I think we have to be aware of that. We have to look at that, and what are we going to say about that? What's going to be the ADAPT role in that area? And there was discussion on that. I think without getting in, the question for us will be, well, how do you do that? I mean, all these things, we have to blast through the discussion, the issues, the complexities, and at the end of the day, come out and say, well, what is going to be the strategic approach of ADAPT? And I think the third area is the area that it was mentioned again by Ms. Gosun, got the least discussion, but I think it's also, again, a key issue, is this: how do you involve local government, the community, local level in the adaptation process, in involving the voice of the local level in national planning, national development planning, and that's just not an adaptation. That's a whole issue of devolving and decentralizing responsibilities and resources. So you just don't tack that on the basis of adaptation. That adaptation would become part of the mainstreaming, and then, again, how is local government going to be local government and the community brought into the overall planning process, which then would be reflected in the project development area. And I think that's an area that really needs a lot of work. And I think that's something that, it's come up in some discussion. How do you involve the local, the community? How do you involve NGOs? And I've had quick answers for that, but I think on reflection, that's something we are going to have to think about in greater detail. So those are the three themes. I think what we have to do, and maybe there'll be a little bit more said tomorrow, is how ADAPT's going to address all of that.